Welcome back, friends. You know why you're here. Today we're going to run through everything Evil Dead in preparation to Evil Dead Rise. Let's bring this franchise to the front of all of our minds, revisiting exactly what makes an Evil Dead film in preparation for the new one. And of course, ranking along the way, let's jump straight in. It's 1981 and there's this new horror flick out that you've heard about. It's got this guy, Bruce Campbell, and he plays Ash, who with his girlfriend and a group of friends go to a remote cabin in the woods. For this group of friends, something feels immediately off, and it's backed up by this recording they find in the basement.
This is the tape I found downstairs.
This explains the Book of the Dead, which is a book bound in human flesh and inked in human blood. The book explores a lot, including dark entities, and reading it out loud results in demon resurrection. Because what is uncovered is a darkness in these woods, trapping Ash, Shelley, Scott, Linda, and Cheryl within this location, possessing them one by one.
Awakened us from our ancient slumber. You will die! Like the others before you.
Imagine watching the people you love the most become possessed one by one, and the only way you can save their soul is by getting rid of them. Okay, it may look a little bit Punch and Judy at times, but other than that, it is complete terror. And this was all the start of something big, the beloved Evil Dead franchise. And the first film was unlike any other. It somehow set up horror tropes to come, which is so interesting because in itself, there's nothing quite like it. It's not entirely a slasher because of the supernatural elements, but somehow this series was able to set up future situational structures and netting for films of the next 4 decades. And at the same time, completely stand on its own, unless directly referenced in films like Cabin in the Woods. Really, there's nothing quite like The Evil Dead. But I guess this isn't completely true, because The Evil Dead was based on the Sam Raimi short Within the Woods from 1978, which he refers to as the prototype for The Evil Dead, similar to how Lee Winnell and James Wan created the Saw short to get funding for the feature. This was to demonstrate Raimi's skills and secure the bag for production, which was not an easy feat, and Raimi ended up calling in a lot of favors. It was rumored during production that the crew went days without showering and they burnt furniture along the way to stay warm. But fortunately, all of the sweat and tears and hard work really did pay off, and what they created was something truly unique. Not only was the film terrifying for its time, but it also coined a whole new camera technique. Like I said, it was the birth of many things. This is the POV shaky cam, used to show the entity or monster's perspective. And we don't stop there, because this also resulted in the projectile cam or the Ramo cam, which became a staple in his directing style, and you might catch it in some of his other films, including Spider-Man. Here you can see the diagram of the Ramo cam, which involves using a T-bar attached to the front of the camera that would smash through the glass. Here you can see it actually in use before the camera enters, capturing the shot in one clean action as close as possible to the action, paired with some elaborate practical effects in which Raimi's aim was to make the film as gruesome as possible. He was not interested in what guidelines suggested in terms of censorship, and this threw audiences off completely. It was a whole new style that couldn't be boxed or manufactured. A new type of evil, a new type of fear. And because Sam Raimi wasn't afraid to cross the line, we ended up with one of the most controversial assault scenes within horror. I know you know the scene. Many people even admit that they didn't realize what happened to Cheryl at the time, and as much as I enjoy and love this film, I can't say it was ever justified. Let's look a little bit at the lore of the film so we can remember where it all started and where it's going. The initial film features the first look at the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, aka the Book of the Dead, and it's pure evil that resurrects demons thanks to the tape's information. The iconic book became the symbol, it still is the symbol of the Evil Dead franchise, and that's all thanks to legendary special effects artist Tom Sutherland's design. The Evil Dead is a classic for many reasons. It's deeply unique from storylines to techniques. It's rebellious and unafraid with that charismatic Ash as the final boy. I admire everything that this film set out to achieve, And I'm sorry if this is predictable, but it lands in my #1 spot so far. But this isn't always the preferred placement because Evil Dead 2 broke the dreaded sequel curse, holding on to all the aspects we loved from the first film, but adding some extra spice in one of the most interesting ways. Now that the film was respected, Sam Raimi and his writing partner Scott Spiegel took a leap of faith, adding in a new edge. A comedic edge. While in the previous entry the filmmakers aimed to terrify the audience, now we're invited to celebrate the darkness and blood as Ash slayed the demons with a chainsaw fist. And this isn't the only thing that was switched up. This always confuses me, and I needed to get my head back straight onto this path. Have you ever heard of a sequel that's also a remake? A requel? But it's not like that. In Evil Dead 2, we follow the same setup and location, but this time Ash is with only his girlfriend. A new girlfriend, same name. As they stay at a remote cabin in the woods and he discovers the audio tape that reveals the Book of the Dead secrets. So why did we start from the start? Why are we doing this all over again? Well, the Evil Dead 1981 was distributed both theatrically and on home video formats, and Raimi had lost all rights to any footage used in this feature. And so the new film was a retelling of what had happened in the most speediest of ways. It's basically an Evil Dead 1 speedrun. Within the first 6 minutes, we're already right up to speed and we're picking up exactly where we left off with the final shot of the first film. If you want to watch them back to back, you can always start 6 minutes in to the sequel, which is so bizarre, and you have not missed anything. And so the story continues, and now Ash is truly on his own as we see what Bruce Campbell is really made of. It's a beautiful marriage between the filmmaker's unique shaky cam stylization, extremely creative visual effects, and Bruce Campbell's star quality. Imagine a film relying purely on the relationship between you and your demonic hand. The film is a love child of pure chaos and bloody creativity, and once again breaking the Evil Dead name out of any pigeonhole or subgenre boundary. And we do have a subplot for this one. So while he's doing his thing battling evil, 4 people approach the cabin. One being archaeologist Raymond Noby's daughter Annie. We know Raymond as the voice on the tapes, meaning this is his cabin. His daughter and her research partner have found the missing pages of the Book of the Dead, and now with 2 others they find their way back to the cabin to show Raymond. But when they arrive, they find Ash covered in blood and they trap him in the cellar. But it's not long before the possessed reveals themselves and Ash has to final boy his way out of the cabin, but this time with heightened thrills and violence, and the makeup? Chef's kiss. There's no question about it, Evil Dead 2 is more polished, but its comedic approach will really divide the audience on whether they love the first film or the retelling and addition to the first film as the second film more. It depends what kind of style you like, what you prefer in your horror. And the polishing does not stop with just the entities, we also have Ash. He's slightly more assertive in this version, you really see his personality come out, and come nightfall, of course, he becomes a little bit more demonic. And this film adds a lot more information to the Evil Dead lore. Because we get a brand new recap, they take time in Evil Dead 2 to give us more information about the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. The passages of the book are now known to be written by a race known as the Dark Ones. Written long ago, the book served as a passageway to the evil world beyond. It's said to be written where the seas ran red with blood, and this was the blood used to ink the book. But in the year 1300 AD, the book disappeared. Now, with the recovery of the lost pages, a person is able to manifest a dark spirit and also create a rift in time and space, stay with me, where the spirit will then be forced to get into the rift. We now have the pieces of the book that will contain the evil. So you first got to rip time and space, and then you push the demon in, and somehow it closes. Which of course is the setup for the next film. And Evil Dead 2 actually had the first mention of Deadites.
Slay the beast! 'Tis a Deadite!
These are the names given to the little suckers known as parasitic demons that possess the bodies of mortals and feast on their souls.
We want what is yours.
Life!
We get the first mention at the very end of the film after Annie has opened up the rift in time and space, but unfortunately Ash is sucked inside as well, and this is how it ends. Evil Dead 2 holds up as a larger-than-life reinvention of the first one with a whole new tone. The special effects makeup alone personally wins me over. It feels, I wasn't gonna say this, but I really do feel like it's kind of Peter Jackson before there was Peter Jackson. It must be a huge influence for his work, especially Dead Alive. And I don't know about you, but I have to put it in my second spot, which makes me so boring, but it's true. And as I mentioned, this is extremely interchangeable depending on your personal taste and how much you love the more comedic style or the more scary, terrifying one, which I believe the original is a little bit more serious. From here, the sequel that was set up in the second wasn't released until 1992. The working title for the film was Medieval Dead, which comes as no surprise. The third film in the franchise follows Ash through a dark horror fantasy comedy. Once again, the franchise will not be pigeonholed. Now we add a whole new fantasy element. He's trapped in the Middle Ages after being sucked into the rift, and now he battles the undead in his quest to return to the present. At the start of the film, Ash recaps how he got into this situation, and somehow Linda, his girlfriend, is played by another actress, this time Bridget Fonda. It's a goofy retelling poking fun at the fact the initial setup has been done slightly different every single time. The men in this time believe that Ash is part of a prophecy sent to save them from the Deadites, and Ash impresses them by holding his own against the entities, with his now iconic chainsaw arm and his sawn off boomstick.
This is my boomstick!
But in this one, he has a new layer to his personal lore. Every film we learn a little bit more about Ash, which is the obvious progression for any franchise. But every time, it's just got a new layer to his character. In the opening flashback, we see Ash as a sales clerk for S-Mart, where he met Linda. And this new thread allows Ash to become more relatable, not just as a modern man in medieval times, but as a middle-class retail worker. It adds more of a comedic tone to the film, continuing from the second. He's not just Final Boy Ash anymore, he's our Ash. And his modern weapons soon give him god status. Sheila, played by Embeth Davids, is quick to fall under this stranger's allure. Ash said, Linda who? Basically. Armed with a new hand, Ash sets off to find the Book of the Dead and return to his timeline. The film is completely wacky, taking inspiration from A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, The Three Stooges, and Conan the Barbarian. Needless to say, it's wacky and it's full of one-liners.
I got a bone to pick with you.
But it's groovy in its own way. I'm sorry, I had to. And of course, the more wild the Evil Dead film, the more special effects are used. The makeup and effects of the film were handled by two different companies, and master Tom Sullivan, who had previously worked on the franchise, also contributed to these visual effects. But Raimi still manages to go back and add in his own stylization. As we see, his staple shaky POV cam still gets some runtime. This film feels like more of a dark adventure, and not much is added to the lore, but we learn that the book has other aspects, other pages, other chapters, other ways to help or hinder its reader. And in this one, it's not only the key to get him there, but it's the key to take him back. We learn the Book of the Dead has knowledge, and from this, Ash receives a spell and a potion that allows him to travel back to his own time. And here we have two choices, the original ending or the alternative, depending on where you're from. The alternative is much darker, but it's still goofy. People call it really dark, but it's still Evil Dead Army of Darkness style. In this one, Ash wakes up too late and civilization, as we know, has collapsed. In the original ending shown in US theaters, after Ash takes the potion, we cut to him retelling his adventures to a co-worker back at S-Mart. Here he encounters a demon and he saves the store in his everyday real life. This is a good lead-in for the series that was to come, Ash vs. the Evil Dead, again by Sam Raimi. Here we pick up 30 years later and we follow on the effects that these three different adventures, three films had on Ash's life. Campbell stated that he plays the character of Ash in this series as someone who battles with survivor's guilt. This series played out for 3 seasons before being cancelled, but it's been confirmed an animated revival is in development. Army of Darkness is a wild and wacky entry for the franchise, taking Ash's goofy charm as far as possible while softly retaining elements of the first 2 films. The film added a new layer compared to Ash's character, a lot of this due to the one-liners. Army of Darkness is where Evil Dead let loose of any expectations. It literally removed it from the bounds of Earth that we know. Here we freely explored special effects and editing to create this unique blend of horror, comedy, and adventure. I'd say Army of Darkness is a strange wrap-up in a series that started off so seriously and so well, bad choice of words, but dark. It does hold its own charm, but it's so far away from where we started with a film that was truly terrifying and aimed to scare. And because we only have 4 films, I'm gonna wait to the end to show you my full ranking, just so we don't give anything away. Because here is where everything changes. Evil Dead 2013. This is a wild ride for the franchise. Correct me if I'm wrong, but besides remaking a horror film in a different language for a new audience, Evil Dead from 2013 is one of the only horror films that was able to successfully reimagine and remake a horror film, flipping the meaning and the atmosphere on its head to create something completely, totally new and pull it off. I'm talking about the remaking of a film alone, not the readaptation. Stephen King films do not count. They literally took the source material from a film and flipped it on its head, and it still worked. It's a clean cut of another side of a coin, a total new film with the same principles for a whole new audience, and it's just magic. Fede Alvarez directs this reimagining, which follows a group of 5 people to a remote cabin. Mia, her brother David, David's new girlfriend, and 2 of their close friends. Here they discover the franchise symbol, the Book of the Dead, accidentally unleashing evil to possess them. But they manage to tie in a pretty meaningful metaphor to disguise it. The reason we're at the cabin is because Mia is detoxing. She plans to get clean cold turkey. And the detox symptoms are pretty intense. In fact, they could be mistaken for possession.
Vomiting, chills, paranoia. It's not going to be nice.
This also works, creating a failsafe for Mia not to be trusted or believed by anyone else there. It guarantees she will be so desperate to leave and they'll want to keep her in this situation. Mia is now untrustworthy, and there's nothing more scary than someone literally possessing you, but because of your personal situation, the people you love the most are at arm's length and they still can't hear you out. From jump, this film aims to terrorize the audience. It's got epic sacrifices, crude language, people being burnt alive, and this is only a minute in. The Book of the Dead gets a makeover, and it's more of a scrapbook vibe, but it's still gritty. And fortunately for the dark side, we have a moron who picks it up and unleashes the evil in the woods waiting. And it's not long before something attaches itself to Mia, and then one by one, it picks off everyone else in excruciating ways. They really said, how dark can we go? And most of this I can't even show on YouTube. But the film makes sure to pay ode to the OG. We have our point of view shots, although dramatically less shaky. Ash's hand removal is replicated twice in the film, and there's also small objects like Linda's necklace. Unfortunately, they do carry over the most controversial scene from the first film with the tree branches. But that's just the start, because just like the original film, this film disregarded any guidelines to keep it rated a particular way. In fact, the 2013 Evil Dead is known as one of the most goriest films ever made, and for good reason. It holds the record for the most fake blood used in a single scene, with approximately 50,000 gallons of faked blood used during the rain blood scene. The filmmakers utilized a mixture of fake blood, water, and food coloring to create the blood effects, which resulted in a visually stunning and intense bloody scene. The 2013 Evil Dead also featured more elaborate and detailed creature designs. The film special effects couldn't be more different to the original, which relied on homemade practical effects. However, some practical effects were still used in 2013, but I think it's pretty obvious that when you put these films back to back, they are very much a product of the time, and they both really push the boundaries of what was possible, impressive in their own ways. And for this one, the extreme take on the original slightly twists the law. Now, according to a book, a demon, taker of the souls, requires 5 souls to create an apocalypse. And this involves in having evil rise, it got me when I heard it, from hell to take over Earth. And they give more solutions, which aren't great. They say to prevent this, they need to kill the host in order to save their soul. And there's 3 lovely options for this. You can either give your loved one a live burial, bodily dismemberment, or purification by fire. And in an unlikely event, David ends up being the hero of this film. He makes these sacrifices, and doing this to his sister is the hardest of all. It definitely has parallels back to Ash having to kill off his friends and girlfriend in the original film. Overall, the Evil Dead remake was looking to get people talking, and it definitely made a stir. It appeals to a whole new audience and lives up to the controversial standards 3 decades later. For me, the film flipping it on its head for a new audience while nodding at the original was the only way to do it. And honestly, I wish more horror movies would take note when they're doing remakes that are just relying on the source material of the original film, so the original screenplay. And they had to do this because Ash could not be replicated. Instead, they used what technology they had at the time to make the film more terrifying than it could have ever been. I'm sure you know where this lies to me, but I'd love to know down below in the comments where it lies for you in your ranking. I applaud this film for the way it was able to remake the original and in a new, terrifying way. I mean, the Evil Dead franchise runs deep, from the endless Easter eggs to the spin-off series, the movies, and there's a whole separate timeline we didn't even touch on based on the Deadites alone. It's very inspirational. It only takes one original movie to change everything. And there's really only one rule for Evil Dead that threads all these films together. Wherever the book goes, chaos follows. And at the end of the 2013 Evil Dead, where we left off, the book just sits there, ready for a new location. Which leads us to our new upcoming entry, Evil Dead Rise. This is not a direct continuation of the 2013 film, but it takes place in the same universe. Evil Dead Rise is described as a reimagining of the original concept with a fresh new approach and setting. The film follows a group of people who become trapped in a high-rise building, fighting against evil forces unleashed by the Necronomicon. And while it shares similarities, I mean, it's in the same universe, same kind of feel as the 2013 film, this is meant to stand on its own feet, its own ground, in fact. I am so psyched for this new film. I know a lot of people have already seen it. There's been a lot of early screenings. I'm gonna watch it very soon in a couple of days, so I'll keep you up to date with my thoughts on that. But let me know what your thoughts are on the Evil Dead series down below. I'd love to hear them. Let me know your ranking. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you did enjoy this video and you like fun videos about horror movies, I happen to do videos all the time about horror movies and thrillers. Anything dark cinema, you're looking for recommendations, I'm your girl. Just hit subscribe and you'll get videos in your subscription box every single week for free. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can head over to Patreon. I have it linked down below and you can get some bonus videos over there. I'll talk to you all very soon. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye, friends.